This is Ali Larijani, and he is the head of the Iran war effort. And he was assassinated yesterday or 2 days ago, and the Iranians have confirmed this, okay? So he is confirmed to be dead. Analysts are extremely worried about this because he is a very pragmatic person. And so you can negotiate with him, right? So once this war reaches a certain point where both sides are exhausted, then it is possible to approach him and say, you know what, let's just negotiate a ceasefire. And he'd be willing to because he's very experienced. He's also very influential, so he's able to bring together the different factions of the Iranian government and negotiate a ceasefire. With him dead, it is now almost impossible to foresee a ceasefire. By targeting Larijani, the Israelis and the Americans have ensured that there will be no off-ramp now. This war we fought to the bitter end. And unfortunately, as we discussed previously, that is the objective here. The Israelis and the Americans are interested in maximalist aims to destroy Iran permanently. All right, okay. This leaves us with three major questions that I want to look at today, okay? The first big question is, how are these leaders dying? It's not that easy to kill a leader, right? Because he's protected by security. Usually, there are two ways to figure out where the leader is, okay? There's human intelligence, called HUMINT, and there's signal intelligence, called SIGINT. Signal intelligence just means electronic eavesdropping, where I listen in on your telephone calls, where I track your IP address, okay? And the Americans and the Israelis are saying that we are using electronic surveillance in order to track these people down. I don't think that's convincing. The most important source, the most reliable source of information is human intelligence, having spies embedded in local networks to spot for you where they are. That's the best way to figure out where they are. So then this raises the question, how are the Israelis and the Americans getting this human intelligence, okay? All right, that's the first question we want to look at. Second question is like, why are they dying? Like, what's the point of killing them, right? Because once they die, they can just be replaced, and they're often replaced by a more extreme individual, okay? So that's the second question we want to look at. And the third question we want to look at is, what does this mean for the war and the world? All right, so those are the three big questions I want to look at. So to answer these three questions, I want to introduce a new idea to you, okay? It's called the law of proximity. The idea is this. Whenever you play a game, you're not just playing one game. You're playing many, many different games. And the game that you choose to play is the one that is most proximate to you, the one that is most close to you. And that impacts your decision-making the most. Let me explain to you what this means using an analogy, okay? Let's just use your life. You are playing actually multiple games every single day, all right? So let's examine this. The first game you play, of course, is the family game, right? So you might have parents and you have siblings, okay? And the game you're playing, of course, is to win attention from your parents. And to do so, depending on who your siblings are, you might use different strategies, including doing well in school or being a pain in the ass. The parents are playing another game, which is social prestige, right? So they're competing against other parents to have the best family possible, all right? So, and then not only do you play a game at home, but you also play games at school, right? Right? So when you go to school, you're competing against your classmates for attention and popularity, but you're also playing a game in school to get the best grades so that you can get into a good college, right? Then you go to work where you're competing in order to win the favor of your boss and to be popular among your colleagues. Then you play a city game where you live in Beijing and you want Beijing to be better than maybe Shanghai or Shenzhen, okay? And then you play a game of maybe a nation where you want China to be stronger than Japan, okay? So as you can see, every single day you're playing multiple games, even though you may not recognize it. And again, what's important is the game that is most important to you is the game which you are most close to, right? The one that you can see in front of you. But this is also true for nations as well, where we think that the game is between nations, but really the game is within nations. And the conflict within nations is the one conflict that determines how nations behave against each other. We will look at the civil conflicts in America, in Israel, and in Iran to figure out why they behave the way they do, and then figure out how this war will progress. Clearly, there is a civil conflict right now in America. Okay, you have the Democrats and you have the Republicans. Now, what's odd is that even though these two different political parties are at war with each other, they both support the war because their calculus is different. Okay? So why do the Democrats support this war? Well, it's because they believe that this war will be extremely unpopular in America, which will allow the Democrats to dominate in the midterms in November and then win the presidential election in 2028. And they believe that this war will be so unpopular, it will destroy Donald Trump and allow the Democrats to rule forever. It will basically destroy the Republican Party. And so that is your strategy. And if you think about it, it actually makes a lot of sense. The Republicans have a different strategy, which is this war may be unpopular, and this war make America lose, but it's okay. Why? Because in a time of war, the president has something called the Emergency Powers Act, okay? Emergency powers. Emergency powers allows the president to essentially suspend the Constitution and to suspend or delay elections. But as you can see, this is not really about America defeating Iran. This is really about the Democrats or Republicans trying to obtain power and keep it, okay? There's actually a much deeper divide in America, okay? And this divide is a conflict between the elite and the counter-elite. Remember how we introduced the idea of elite overproduction, right? That what leads to civil war is that you have too many elite who want to be the ones in power. Power is a zero-sum game, and therefore, when you have elite overproduction, they have to go to war against each other in order to have the power. And so, who are the elite and who is the counter-elite? Well, I mean, to put it very simply, the Democrats represent the elite, and the Republicans represent the counter-elite, okay? So, basically, the elite is the empire, and counter-elite is MAGA, which is America First. And so, they have two different ideals for America. The empire is to maintain the current global order, and MAGA is to retreat back into the Western Hemisphere and focus on Americans' core national interests. They're also divided into finance and AI. So in other words, Wall Street are the main backers of the current elite, and then Silicon Valley are the main backers of the counter elite. So these people are interested in maintaining the status quo. They are interested in a revolution. And so this is the main divide in America that will eventually lead to a civil war, like an actual civil war, okay? But right now, they're fighting over foreign policy. So let me give you a concrete example of why they're fighting. Why are people in finance fighting with people in AI? And there's a very good reason. Because if you're able to control Washington, D.C., if you're able to control the levers of government, you're able to make a lot of money for yourself, okay? So let's look at this concretely. Okay? What people don't really understand is that both finance and AI are bubbles that will burst. They're parasites, okay? So finance is a parasite because there's something called a private credit bubble. The idea of private credit is very simple. Rather than banks issuing loans to companies, companies privately issue loans to other companies. And you would think that these companies would be very careful with who they lend to and how much they lend to, right? That's not true though. Why? Because in 2008, these banks destroyed the global economy, and the American government bail them out. They suffer no consequences. If you do not suffer consequences for your stupidity, well, you're just going to be more stupid in the future, okay? So these companies believe that we control Washington, D.C., therefore we can be as risky and stupid as we want. So they're giving out lots and lots of silly loans to companies because they collect a fee. And then when these loans don't actually work out, meaning the companies go bankrupt, what they do is they say, oh, we'll lend you some more money to keep afloat, okay? So now this problem has reached about $2 trillion. They think that, okay, well, worst case scenario, the government will bail us out if we all go bankrupt because we're too big to fail. And all our friends are in government. And in 2008, that worked. But there's a problem today, which is there's also another group that's doing the same crap, okay? And it's called the AI bubble. You've got companies like Microsoft, OpenAI, Oracle, NVIDIA, okay, lots and lots of different companies. And the way they operate is they just lend money to each other, okay? It's like, I give you $1 billion, then you give me $1 billion, and now we have $2 billion. And it's getting a lot of money from the GCC and other investors. The problem, of course, is what's happening in the war. So if the GCC can no longer put more money into this bubble, then eventually this bubble will have to burst. But they're like, that's okay. Why? Because we control Trump. We are the stock market. Therefore, Washington, D.C. will bail us out, okay? So that's the war going on, where you have two parasitic forces, and they are all looking for government bailouts when their bubble bursts. The government doesn't have infinite money. It can only bail out one side, right? If the Democrats can win the House and the presidency into 2028, then the private credit people will get bailed out. But if Trump and his people stay in power in 2028, then the AI people will get bailed out, okay? So that's the civil war going on in America right now. And then, of course, you have the Israelis. People don't really appreciate how divided Israel is. This is about 2020 when you have like 1 million people in Tel Aviv calling for the resignation, the impeachment of Prime Minister Netanyahu. Because Netanyahu, like most Israeli politicians, is very corrupt. And at this point in Israel, it seemed as though Netanyahu was going to fall from power and go to jail for the rest of his life. But then, of course, October 7th happened. Okay? October 7th happened, and then Israel is now in permanent war that gives him emergency powers. Okay? To give you a sense of how divided Israel is, let's look at their Knesset, which is their parliament. Guys, this is a lot of political parties. As you can see, none of them are dominant. Okay? People don't really appreciate this. You know, a lot of people talk about a Jewish global conspiracy. What people don't really understand is the Jewish people have never, ever gotten along. So you go back to the time of Jesus, and there were like 3 major factions in Jerusalem. They were the Sadducees, there were the Pharisees, and the Essenes. They all hated each other. Okay, so I would say there's like the 2 major conflicts is represented by Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. These are 2 cities in Israel, and they are the 2 major cities of Israel, and they represent 2 different centers of gravity, 2 different visions for Israel, where Tel Aviv is this open, democratic, modern, progressive city. Lots of homosexuals, lots of open ideas, very secular, very outward-looking, very Western. Jerusalem is the complete opposite, okay? Very religious, very conservative. And they hate each other. And the fact that Tel Aviv is getting destroyed right now in this war, people in Jerusalem are actually okay with this, okay? They're not like, oh my God, they're killing Israel. No. Tel Aviv is the great Satan. Let's just destroy it so that we can build a theocracy. Okay, all right. So now I want to talk about Iran. And this is their last presidential election. And as you can see, it's a pretty divided country. All right, so let me explain very quickly what I see is the major divide in Iran, okay? So of course you have the Islamic theocracy, and they're in conflict with secular nationalists. And now of course there are these ethnic groups as well. I don't really think the ethnic groups matter that much, okay? What really matters is a conflict between the secular nationalists and the Islamic theocracy. Right? So basically the rural-urban divide. people who are well educated and want to see Iran as a secular state that promotes democracy and progress in science versus these religious individuals, okay? Now, what happens is that in a war, you become more extreme. So what will happen is that the Islamic theocracy will transition into Shia eschatology or martyrdom, okay? Where they think that this war is about having the 12th Imam, Mahdi, who is basically the Messiah, return to lead them to war against the great Satan, which is Israel and the United States, okay? So over time, the Islamists will become much more radical. This will force the secular nationalists to also become much more radical as well. So they will become Persian exceptionalists, okay? And what this means is that Persia is the greatest civilization in human history, and therefore it is worth dying for. It is worth fighting for. The survival of the Persian civilization is much more important than the survival of the Iranian state. The great question for the Iranians is, are they able to reconcile the differences between these two strands of the culture? Or will this lead to civil war in Iran, okay? We are seeing civil war in Israel, we're seeing civil war in America. Iran cannot afford to fight a civil war at this time because they're being bombarded by two very powerful nations. Unfortunately, the law of proximity teaches us that people are much more interested in their own internal conflict than the outside global conflict, okay? And so this understanding now helps us answer the three big questions of today, right? How are these leaders getting killed? Why are they getting killed? And what will this mean for the rest of the world, okay? And so the first two questions, how are they getting killed, why are they getting killed? They're getting killed because of these civil conflicts within these nations, okay? These different factions are providing intelligence to their enemies in order to limit their internal enemies. Because again, it's not that easy as a foreign nation to identify the location precisely of that leader, okay? And what we're seeing in this war is both the Iranians and the Israelis are doing a very excellent job of killing each other's leaders. And that's not actually common, right? So I think this civil conflict within these nations offers the best guide, the best understanding of why this is happening, okay? The third question is, where's the world going? As you can see from these conflicts, it seems as though the world can only become much more theocratic in the end, okay? At the end of the day, this war in Iran, in the Middle East, it's really a war between two different competing visions of the world, okay? You have the global secular financial order, okay? And this is the world that we live in today. And they're fighting against a nationalist theocracy. So this is what we can expect over the next 5 to 10 years, where Iran becomes much more theocratic and extreme and nationalistic. Israel abandons democracy and embraces theocracy. America will also abandon democracy and embrace theocracy, because that is the general trend of the world.